My name is Cory Osborn from Eastern Iowa Hypnosis and the Osborn Experience. I travel all over the country doing shows, and I run a clinic, part of which you can see behind me here. Okay, so my co-presenter, Sean Michael Andrews, is here. Sean, why don't you take it away? Introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Sean. I'm a hypnotist. I do street hypnosis, clinical hypnosis, and stage hypnosis. And I've been doing this for a few years now, and it still is exciting. It's still so much fun. It's still, I don't know, it's the coolest thing ever. And now, and then Stephanie gives me the thumbs up.
Nice.
So
I
better start being entertaining here. So anyway, I still, after all these years, I still believe that hypnosis is the coolest thing ever, and I love doing it. I love teaching it. I love everything about hypnosis, and especially street hypnosis.
I do too. And in fact, the very first person I ever hypnotized was because I saw one of Sean's videos on YouTube, and I wrote down everything he did, and I wrote down everything he said, and I took it to a family party, and I dropped somebody at my feet, and from then on I was hooked. And that started my long journey on this path to hypnosis, to doing a full-time show and a full-time office. And I'll tell you what, Sean is one of the best in the business. If you've never taken a course with him, or if you've never taken one of our shared courses, there's not much better that you can get out there. There might be some more attractive people, but their content's not as good.
Oh, surely not.
Anyway, we've brought everybody together tonight to talk about hypnosis in the time of COVID-19. You know, I think, Sean, you'd probably agree with me that even if people weren't affected by a mandatory shutdown or something like that, that there was probably a good 2-month break in people's businesses. And if you're a stage hypnotist, obviously it's one of the busiest times of year, or it was every other year. But I think it probably also affected a lot of people's clinical and just, you know, street hypnosis demonstrations. You can't get out to your you know, parks or the university quads, or even malls, boardwalks, anything like that, even just to do some street hypnosis. And so when we were putting this webinar series together, we thought, well, why don't we give some people, you know, our viewers, some resources that they can use to safely do street hypnosis or demonstrational hypnosis in the time of COVID-19. And Sean, I think as we go through this, you know, as we were talking about putting this webinar together, you actually pointed out that some of these techniques can actually be used in a stage show as well, safely. And so we have a list of things that we're going to talk about here, but please do not hesitate to put something in the comments. And Sean and I would love to answer questions as we go along, or at the end, if that's appropriate. And we're going to be with you for about an hour here is our plan. And we will take those questions, those comments as they come along. But Sean, really what we talked about was a lot of your instant or rapid inductions actually use a lot of touching. You know, you've got your arm pulls, your hand drops, that sort of thing. And so we sort of prepared a list here of things that you can do safely. So,
well,
why don't you go ahead and comment on that?
Okay,
Sean?
well, let me start out about the ones that you can't do. I mean, a little bit more about that. I mean, obviously the hand drop, you normally got your hand on the subject's shoulder, and you've got their hand pressing on your hand. And obviously we can't do that one now. That's the contact, the proximity is too close. You have the touching, the contact. And so that just isn't going to work. Something with an arm pull induction where you're this close, you're about this far away from the person's face. Obviously you can't do that one. And then also my favorite induction, the handshake interrupt. I mean, it's all, you know, handshake. It's
Right.
The proximity, everything, the touching and the proximity, even though we're touching in appropriate areas, Nowadays, no area is appropriate. So we can't do any of those. So we have to come up with different ways to do it. And Cory, as Cory said, many of these things are going to apply to street hypnosis, stage hypnosis, and clinical hypnosis, because we normally touch people in all of those, and it just doesn't go right now. I'm just praying for a vaccine really fast, because this is not good. Yeah.
I have my
vaccine or a
first show
treatment.
in 3 months this weekend, and I had a list of precautions about a page long for a group of 40 people. So
Good. Oh, good Lord.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, okay. So what can you do? I'll speak generally first, and then I'll get into the things that you can do in a stage show or street show. So obviously, the Dave Elman induction, the way it's classically done, involves touching. It involves picking somebody's hand up by the wrist and dropping it. And although that's not very much contact, it's enough that you don't want to do it. Also, you're sitting a little bit closer to them. The good thing is that the Elman induction originated as a stage induction and doesn't require contact at all. You can be far away. As a matter of fact, I've been doing Zoom sessions to film video, and obviously there's no touching over Zoom. And so it can, the classic Dave Elman. All right. So the normal Dave Elman has, 5 parts. You get the eyelid catalepsy, and then you and then you test for the catalepsy of the arm, and then you go on from there. So instead of the classic Elman, where you pick the arm up by the wrist and then you drop it to ensure that arm is heavy and loose and limp, instead of doing that, what you do is you actually have them extend their arm out in front of them and make it stiff and rigid and make a fist, and then you challenge them, to try and bend it, and of course they can't. And then with the snap of the fingers or another signal, maybe you clap your hands or something like that, their arm goes loose and limp, it falls in their lap, and they go much deeper. So you can do that, and you don't even have to touch them the way you normally touch them in an Elman induction. And that's actually the way the Elman started. It was a stage induction, and you didn't have to touch people.
So that's just a different form of catalepsy, right?
It is, right. Catalepsy can be having the muscles completely flaccid, or it can have the muscles completely stiff. We call both of these things catalepsy. And the kind of cool thing about the arm stiff, and some of you who do the Dave Elman induction regularly will know that sometimes when you pick that hand up by the wrist and you drop it, sometimes when the hand drops into their lap, sometimes the head goes too. Mm-hmm. Same thing happens with the arm catalepsy with the stiff and rigid. And when you snap your fingers and that arm goes loose and limp, sometimes the head goes also. So you get the same clues that you get in the classic Elman. Feels funny to call it classic Elman, because the classic Elman was actually the stage one. But anyway,
right.
But most of us
in the context, I mean, most of us that learn the first version of the Elman induction you learn is the therapy style induction, right? With the loose arm catalepsy, and you pick it up by the wrist and drop it. That's really at least that was my experience when I learned the Elman. That was the first version that I learned.
Right, and I did as well. I didn't actually learn the stage version until I taught that one class with Larry Elman, and he set me straight, and he said, no, it's like this, and this is the way it started. The only reason they changed it to the loose arm was because they didn't feel it was appropriate in a doctor's office for a bunch of people standing around with their arms stiff and rigid. You know, I
Right.
I don't see any problem with that, but you know,
No, in fact,
doctors.
I would put a whole bunch of people like that and start handing out business cards.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
Try to drop it. Oh, that reminds me. Make a note, please, Cory. That's another induction that we can do without touching. That that we can use in street hypnosis. The business card. Uh, yeah, that's a really good one. So anyway, so the Elman induction will work, but if we kind of shift gears into the street hypnosis, often the best way to start street hypnosis is not with your inductions. Often the best way to start street hypnosis is through suggestibility tests. And of course, we have the sign that says, "Can you be hypnotized?" I got a new sign a couple of months ago and I love it. It just says, "Can you be hypnotized? Take the test." And that is a really good way to draw the people in so that you can do some hypnosis with them. Anyway, so often the best way to get people in is through suggestibility tests. For instance, through books and balloons. Now, books and balloons, where you have them imagine that in one hand, usually the left hand, that you're putting heavy books, and on the other hand, on the wrist, you tied a string that goes up to a huge bouquet of helium balloons, and the one wrist rises while the other one drops down because of the weight of the books. That one can be turned into an induction, but not during COVID-19. It
Right.
can't be turned into an induction. But you can do that suggestibility test without touching. And so that's a good thing to do when you're doing street hypnosis.
Well,
Especially
and when you're
with,
doing street hypnosis too, it's like that. This is highly visual. Like if you
yes,
walk past a group of people that are, their both arms are doing something that are odd, out of character. That's a pretty good visual demonstration to get people into your.
it is. That will draw a crowd. True. And also when you got a group of people, usually it's a group of friends, right? And they're there, and then you tell them, "All right, now everybody freeze," because you don't want them to move their arms. Open your eyes and look what everybody else is doing. And of course, you'll have some people that are going just a little bit, but then you'll have the ones that are like this completely,
Right.
and then you have the ones that go the other way, and I just don't know what's going on with them. But
Yeah, that's bizarre.
anyway, but yes, and so they'll laugh, and it kind of breaks the ice. And then you say to whichever ones you want, you say, "You know what? It tells me that you would be really good at going into hypnosis." And then we'll go into one of the inductions besides the Elman that can be done without any touching or any real, close proximity.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's good. Now, finger magnets, traditionally, in the last few years, I've been starting my show with an induction, and that is with the finger magnets. And the classic finger magnets suggestibility test is the one where you have them squeeze their hands together nice and tight, and then you have them spread their fingertips about an inch, half an inch apart, and stare at the space between their fingertips as you tell them that it's as if there were magnets in those fingertips. They're getting closer and closer and closer together. Okay, so this is a good one because almost everybody passes the test, and the people that don't pass the test are the ones that are resisting you and you don't want to play with. So
Right.
it's a good one. But good subjects, as you tell them, as you stare at those fingertips, they press together. They press together even tighter and tighter and tighter. And then you do the challenge. As you stare at those fingertips, you try to pull them apart. They stick even tighter. And some of your better subjects will be stuck. They cannot get those fingertips apart. It's impossible for them to do it. And they'll stare intently at those fingertips and they cannot pull them apart. And that's when you know that person is in hypnosis. And
Mm-hmm.
you don't have to touch them in order to do this. They're in hypnosis. Now, what I used to do in the shows pre-COVID-19 is I would go around, and the people who were stuck, I would just push their hands down and say sleep. And then those are the ones that I would bring up on stage. On the street, I would just push the hands down and then work with the ones that I thought were the best ones. Of course, I can't do the physical contact now. So what I do now, and this is something that I've just started doing, and it works pretty well. I actually did this kind of by accident. I used to push down about 5 of them, and I did this at a hypnosis convention. And of course, everybody locks in a hypnosis,
Right.
right? So they're all there. So I said to them the first time, I said, well, I'll tell you what, if you want to get your fingers apart, here's what I want you to do. In a moment, I'm going to have you take those fingertips and touch them to your forehead. And when you do, one of 2 things is going to happen. Either your fingertips are going to come apart, or you're going to go into hypnosis. And about half of them went
Just
into
immediately.
hypnosis. Yes. And so you can do this on the street, and when they go into hypnosis, I mean, well, you got them and you hypnotize them without touching them and without getting close to them, and then you can move on from there. So I think that's a really good induction. It's a good kind of segue from a suggestibility test into an induction, and then you can start doing your skits.
Sure. And I think, I mean, some people, most people, I think, use the magnetic fingers, right? But back in the day, I actually took a hypnosis seminar from, I don't know if you remember his name, Jeffrey Stevens.
Yeah, I remember Jeff.
It's way back in the day. He unfortunately died several years ago. But he actually used in his office a magnetic hands induction.
Okay.
That was very similar. And that, you have a little bit, as opposed to the 1 inch of space, I think you have a little bit more time to talk if they start with their hands out this far.
Right.
So if you are working with somebody that you want to build expectancy with, the magnetic hands might be a good alternative to that. You have a little bit more time for dialogue and for expectancy with this much space. And
Sure.
but it occurs to me, as we were talking about this beforehand, that there are a lot of those things that people would consider pre-tests or suggestibility exercises that can just be turned into an induction just with a few, modifications.
Yeah.
The finger magnets is a really good example of that. Just looking down our list, arm levitation. We talked about arm levitation. What do you think about that as an induction?
Well, it's funny. I have a kind of a long history with arm levitation. That was the first induction that was ever tried on me. I was 16 years old. I was in Mrs. Curry's psychology class at Lansdowne High School in Baltimore County, Maryland. And Mrs. Curry invited a hypnotist to come and do a demo for our psychology class. And so all the guys went and got permission notes, signed by your parents, so that we could get hypnotized. And this guy came in and he said, I want some volunteers. And so I shot up there, never been hypnotized before, me and two of the classmates. And we got up there. So you got 3 16-year-old boys up there, and he started his induction, and it was an arm levitation. For those who've never seen an arm levitation, it's most of the time it starts out like a progressive muscle relaxation induction, and then they tell you to imagine, that one of your hands is beginning to feel different. It's beginning to feel lighter, and it's beginning to rise and lift and rise and lift and rise higher and higher and higher. And the objective is to get it to touch your cheek or whatever. And when it does that, you're going to go into hypnosis. Your eyes are closed. Right? So they don't have to be. Okay. So anyway, my arm was levitating. I could feel it doing little fits and starts, which I now recognize to be subconscious movements. And it was moving toward my face, and it got about 1 inch away from my cheek. And I thought, what's going to happen? I started thinking, what's going on here? And so I pulled myself out. Had I gone with it, maybe I would have gone into trance deeply, but I didn't. And neither did my 2 classmates. And it wasn't until years later I realized that he probably wasn't a very good hypnotist. If you cannot hypnotize 16-year-old boys, you're probably not that great a hypnotist.
Especially
So,
ones that were scrambling to volunteer.
exactly.
Yeah. And it looks like.
Exactly. And I think, well, I was to us because I got scared. And if you do, it says my internet connection is unstable, so we'll see if we're freezing. Steph said we were freezing. You both keep freezing, and I'm assuming it's not the temperature.
You
But,
did just for about 15 seconds, so we're back now.
Okay. All right, good. So anyway, so he didn't give a very good pre-brief, and so I got scared. And I didn't go into hypnosis because of that.
Right.
Now, to his credit, what he had done is he hypnotized a girl in the class before us, and so he brought her up and did some skits with her, and we were all amazed. And probably that's when I was bitten by the bug that I wanted to be a hypnotist. Yeah. But anyway, so arm levitation, yes, and you tell him, and when your hand touches your cheek, you're going to go deep into hypnosis. And you can do that one without touching. You can be pretty far away. You could even do it on Zoom if you chose to. You could certainly do it on stage. There are a lot of stage hypnotists that use that induction. So yeah, arm levitation will work just fine. I want to back up a little bit though, Cory, and I want to
Absolutely.
We talked about finger magnets, and then you were talking about Jeff with his the hands coming together, right? And another finger magnets, one that many people like because it's a true suggestibility test. In other words, the physiological part to this, they're going to touch anyway. But with this one is where you put the fists together and you do the finger magnets and have them imagine that they're being drawn together closer and closer and closer. And it's, a far better test of hypnotizability than the other one. But that one, once again, you can make them stick. And if they stick, then you can give them the choice. Okay, now in a moment, I want you to, two ways you can do it. In a moment, I want you to touch them to your forehead. And when you do, your eyes close down, your head drops forward, and you go into deep hypnosis. Or you can say, and now notice, it feels like they're being attracted to your forehead. They're being attracted to your forehead. You feel that, don't you? And they go, yeah, because they're already hypnotized. Right. Being attracted to your forehead, and they're getting closer and closer and closer. And then you tell them when it touches your forehead, you're going to go into deep trance. And of course they do. So that's another one that you can accomplish without touching anybody. So that's a good COVID-19 induction.
Okay, so you just said something there. I want to hang on for a second before we move on. Is a lot of times, especially in street hypnosis, with the instant inductions, when you're touching somebody or it's a arm pull or whatever, as soon as you've done it that they are hypnotized, right? Like, I mean, you do an arm pull and they collapse against you and their legs are all rubbery and you're like, oh my God, they're hypnotized, right?
Right.
But a lot of times, and I get this question a lot, and depending on whether it's another hypnotist or like an audience member or something, I give a different answer. But you just said, when their fingers come together, they're already hypnotized, right? But I think that's an important distinction for us or when they're stuck together and they can't get them apart, they're already hypnotized, right?
Exactly.
And I think that's a really important distinction is especially when you're not touching somebody, you can't feel for catalepsy, is to sort of know when the hypnosis actually starts. Like the actual state of hypnosis, not like, I mean, obviously as soon as you start the induction, you're trying to start hypnosis, but because I think a lot of people, especially people that don't have a lot of experience hypnotizing people, don't know that you don't have to say sleep and make them close their eyes for them to be hypnotized. In fact, you could do an entire hypnosis session without ever having anybody close their eyes if you wanted to. And they're still in that trance state. But I don't think a lot of people realize that. And I think that in this time where you can't really touch people. You can't really check for catalepsy that way or have them collapse against you. It's really important to actually know when you get to this point and they're stuck, they're in trance right there.
Right.
And at
Yeah.
that point, you know, you can have them close their eyes and deepen. You could, you know, pop their hands apart and do another susceptibility exercise, but they're hypnotized. So is it a susceptibility exercise or a skit? I don't know, but you know what I mean? Like, so yeah, obviously some of these are just classically, once we get to a certain point, you're going to close your eyes and be hypnotized. But if you get a stiff arm or you get a fingers that are stuck together, they're hypnotized at that point without eye closure, without complete, you know, without being a flopper. And it just struck me when you said that, the way you said that, I don't think a lot of people cover stuff like that. Like, when are you actually hypnotized? Well, right there. You know, you can do a lot of stuff. And in fact, if I had to guess with you, if you got to that point and you had their fingers stuck together, my guess would be that you would roll into another routine. You would do something like your foot stuck to the ground, or, you know, some of the other things that you do on the street, and you could right there because they're hypnotized.
Oh yeah. You could definitely do it. It's funny that you mentioned that though, Cory, because sometimes having them close their eyes is really just for aesthetics anyway, because people watching may not realize that person is hypnotized because their eyes are still open. So when you have them close their eyes, everyone thinks, oh, okay, they're really hypnotized, even though we know that's when we add it. Yeah.
Well, it's just like being on stage, you know, probably 30 to 50% of what you do as your induction on stage is more for show than it is for hypnosis. I mean, you know, you don't have to have the dramatic flops in the chair and the whole sleep, you know, you don't have to have all that, but it sure looks nice on a video. And then the audience all goes, you know. So I guess that's the other side of that coin though, right? You could be out on the street and have somebody hypnotized with just the finger magnets and doing a whole bunch of funny stuff, but it doesn't really show the people around you. It's not, you know, showy, bring the crowds in sort of stuff. So that's just the other side of that same coin. But you could, at that point, do pretty much your entire routine without ever having them close their eyes. And I didn't want to take too much time with that, but I really, as soon as you said that, I thought, well, that's really important to point out for people, especially people that might come to train with us that are just starting out, that have only seen their, you know, high school prom show or some guy in a comedy club, you know, and that's, again, we'll talk more about the training at the end of the webinar, but those are the sorts of things that Sean likes to emphasize in the training. At this point, here's what's happening. And, you know, here are the results you can get. And so anyway, I don't want to sidetrack us for too long, but man, you said that and it just lit a light bulb, and I just wanted to bring it up. So
that's fine.
Go ahead.
Let's talk about another old induction. And this is a Dave Elman induction. And I never saw, you know, a video of him doing this. I only had a recording of him doing this, but it's kind of interesting. It can be a suggestibility test, but it can also be an induction. And so what you do is you have them take their index finger and put it out like this and make it stiff. You know, imagine the joint there getting stiff, and then that joint getting stiff, and the other joint getting stiff and rigid. So stiff they won't bend. So stiff they will not bend. You try to bend it, it gets stiffer. You try harder, it gets stiffer. And you're doing this with them. You're facing them. You got that finger out, it gets stiffer. Try to bend it, it gets stiffer. Okay. And then you say, watch my finger too. And now it begins to bend. I'm going to turn my hand this way so you can see what's happening here. Now it begins to bend. It bends, and their finger will bend with yours. And you say, and as it does that, your eyes begin to close. That's right. As it bends, your eyes begin to close, and now they lock, and now they lock tight. And if you try to open them, they lock tighter. You try to open them, they lock even tighter. The harder you try to open them, the more they lock. And you pretty much, I would say 99% sure, you got hypnosis there as well. So it's funny, they're just doing it along with you, and they're bending their finger along with you. And as you do, they're fixated. They're fixated on that finger. And as they do that, their eyes close down. As you tell them, they'll close down, and they lock tight. And the harder you try to open them, the more they stick. And then you can go from there into your first routine.
That's interesting. I had not seen that one before, but it really makes perfect sense to me. I mean, sort of their eyes are sort of mimicking what they see going on with their finger, right?
Yep, exactly. Yeah.
I actually think that would work. That would work twice as well with double jointed people, right? Because then they. Of course, that's not really one of the questions in my pre-talk. Right?
What if it bends the other? What if it bends the other way and it just freak me the heck out?
Oh my God! I have a friend that can do that. She can take all of her fingers and bend them all the way backwards, and I'd just like, no.
No.
Nope. No, it doesn't work for me. It's like finger yoga or something. And
that's right. The hypnotist runs away screaming. No, I don't think so. All right.
I can't do it.
Suggestibility tests. All right, here's another one. Here's one that you certainly can do during COVID-19. You don't have to touch anybody, although I often do when I'm, when it's not COVID-19, but I can do this without that. And that is the Spiegel eye roll. Okay. And the Spiegel eye roll test, developed by Herbert Spiegel of Columbia University. You have them, you say, imagine that I want you to imagine you have a window, a skylight, like right up at your hairline or the top of your head. And I want you to keep your head level and then roll your eyes up as if you were looking through that window.
And I will show you what Sean means, because I know he brings this up because I have a really good Spiegel.
Yeah, you do have a good Spiegel. Okay. Yeah, so go ahead and do that, Cory.
Yeah, so it's.
Yeah, see the zombie eyes, great zombie eyes. And as you keep looking up there, slowly close your eyelids down. See, and so you got these great zombie looking eyes where you're looking at just the sclera. And that means, according to Spiegel's test, that there's 75% probability that you're highly hypnotizable. Aren't you, Cory? Aren't you, Cory?
Yes. Yes, Cory's a somnambulist. Yes, absolutely.
Are we going to talk about what happened at that casino, or we're not going to talk about that tonight? We're not.
Yeah, I don't know.
So anyway, but yeah, so you can do that, and then when the crowd sees somebody with the eyes like Cory just displayed there, that's a real convincer. That's a real eye catcher, so to speak. Mm-hmm. And that's really beautiful. Now, I have seen that once as an induction, and it was an accidental induction. I was at a hypnosis convention in Los Angeles probably 10 years ago, and I was showing people, we're standing out in the lobby between classes, and I was showing people the Spiegel eye roll, and a lady was standing off about, 20 yards away, and she saw that, and she came over and she said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Oh, I'm doing the Spiegel eye roll. Would you like to do it?" And she says, "Yeah." And so she rolled her eyes up, and I had her, as she continued looking up, slowly close her eyes down, and she almost fell over. And one of my friends caught her. He was paying attention. The reason was she thought it was an induction. She didn't know that it was a suggestibility test, but because she thought it was an induction, she went into hypnosis. So
right. So she just assumed at the end of this process, you're going to be hypnotized.
Exactly. And because that was her assumption, she got hypnotized. And thank you, Patrick Coleman, for catching that poor woman, because I didn't see it coming. I thought I never would have imagined it. I mean, I'm very safety conscious, as you know, Cory, and that's one that could have been not good. And so Patrick caught her, and thank goodness. But yeah, so anything can be an induction. It's a good example of that.
Actually, that reminds me of something. I was at a school in Wyoming doing a show. I've done all the high schools in Casper. I do them every year, and The big rodeo thing that's in Cheyenne. I can't think of the name. Anyway, it's like their state fair, but it's like state fair and rodeo, and they have a huge arena in Cheyenne. Anyway, the girl that was in the audience had been to the Hypnotist at the fair. And I didn't know it at the time. I didn't know it until after the show, but apparently he did some sort of finger magnets as part of his induction, because I'm standing on the edge of the stage and I'm doing the susceptibility exercises with the audience, and all of a sudden I see her go right in the front row, and it was like, maybe 3 minutes into my show, and I'm like, so I just tapped her on the shoulder, and I leaned down on the edge of the stage and tapped her on the shoulder and said, eyes open, wide awake, and she said, "Oh, I was hypnotized." And I thought, what? So she came up on stage, and she was part of the show, but at the end of the show I asked her, I said, well, I didn't say sleep or anything, like, how did you get from that? And she's like, I saw it in a show, this guy did this, and all of a sudden all these people were hypnotized. And I was like, oh, okay. But I haven't run into that before or since. But yeah, it was just that one time. It's just very similar to that. I saw her fingers come together, and she just slumped right back in her chair, and her head went right back, and I was like, oh my God, damn, I'm good.
Yeah, I know. That just, she could be a one-person show. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, it's anything can be an induction, and if they have that expectation, which is once again you had the prestige, you were the hypnotist, and so when she saw you do something that she thought she perceived would be an induction, she's gone. I mean, I love people like that.
Right. And sometimes I just want to walk out on stage and just go to the audience and look right here and sleep and just see who falls over. Because I would be like, okay, well, there's 6, 7, 8 people. Come on up, just those are the people. And that's the thing. Like, if they expect you're going to hypnotize them, that would work.
Yes, it would.
Obviously not for 150 or 200 people in the audience, but those somnambulists in the audience, and especially those people that have been hypnotized before, if they think you're going to hypnotize them, it really, and in certain groups, I've done it before. The schools I do every year. Oh, you were on stage last year. Look right here. Sleep. And they just, because they expect you're going to hypnotize them. It's great. It's great.
Yeah,
and I wish everybody was like that, because I would have an office full of clients and a stage full of people.
Yep, it's the prestige of the hypnotist and the expectation of the person that's going to be hypnotized, and that's really all we need. Of course, we want to gain more skills, because we want to be able to get to the people where that wouldn't work with. That's going to work with 5%, maybe a little more, a little less, something like that. But hey, in a big room, that's certainly all you need.
But and sometimes in certain situations, that's all you have room for if you're doing a stage show. A lot of times the street hypnosis, like the susceptibility exercises, might be in a group, but you're really working with people one-on-one. And I know that you have certain ways to choose sort of like if there are 4 or 5 people standing there and you're looking, Sean has this really great, if you haven't seen Sean in a group of people doing this, he has this really great sort of, it's almost like panning a camera where he's watching all of the people. And if you're really looking at him, he has this micro expression like, yes, it's you. I'm coming after you next. Because all the people are standing there and he's just panning like this. And it's really, really fun to watch. If you haven't ever had a chance to see Sean hypnotize some people in person, you definitely need to come join us in Dubuque, because it is so much fun.
It's always fun. I mean, how could someone not love being able to do this? I mean, I think, I always tell people, when you're the hypnotist, you're definitely the most interesting person in the room. And I mean, there will be people that will avoid you because you're the hypnotist. But I think most people, at least in my experience, They want to find out about it some more. And if they don't want to be hypnotized themselves, they certainly want to see you do it to somebody else. So
Right.
they want to watch that. But yeah, it's great. Oh, I wanted to talk a little bit more about COVID-19 and touching. One of the things, one of the reasons why, other than safety and not spreading disease, why we don't want to touch people right now when we're doing our tests and we're doing our inductions and that sort of thing, is because it's not going to be as conducive to trance as it is during normal times. Because you see, when you're doing a stand-up induction with somebody, I'll often have my hand on their shoulder, always keeping a respectful distance. It's, but that's mainly to keep me from getting beaten up by jealous boyfriends and stuff. But hand on the shoulder, so they know that I've got them, they're safe, and I'm not going to let them tip over.
Right.
But now, with everybody being sensitized to the virus, if you touch somebody, it's not going to be conducive to going into trance. People don't want to be touched as much now because of their worrying about the disease.
That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, people don't want to shake hands. They don't want to. It's awful. I hate this, and it's got to go away. I can't live in this world where you can't shake somebody's hand. That's crazy. So it will pass. But anyway, but for that reason, you don't want to touch people because they're going to be less likely to relax and go into trance if they're worried that you're going to infect them